The keyword let has another unique application when used in the for loop. The best way to present this is with some example code that shows the difference between how var and let are handled in a for loop. This will also be a simple exercise where I will ask you to determine what is produced. All right, let's enter the example. So first off, I'm going to set up a for loop. Now when we're setting up a for loop, the header of the for loop contains three parts. We first declare the variable, as I've done there, then a semicolon, and then we enter the condition of the for loop. How long is this for loop going to run? Well, it's going to run while I is less than 3, and then we have to increment the variable. And we do that with the increment operator, generally. Then here's the body of the for loop. And notice that we have curly braces. So a let would be block scoped to the for loop. A var is not. That difference between var and let we have already discovered, already have learned. But there's another unique application we want to look at. But first, let me set this up. I'm going to use the set timeout command again. We used that earlier. Now remember, the way set timeout works is we pass in a function and then we pass in an amount of time that should be waited until the function is invoked. And remember, we talked about how the set timeout is handled by the browser environment, and then the callback is placed in the queue, and when the event loop is ready, it fires off that callback. So the callback is the function that we enter. Now, we can enter the name of a function that we've already declared, or we can declare the function right there. And this becomes a function expression. When we declare it inside of an expression, it's a function expression. So that's what I'm going to do. So there's the body of the function. I'm going to come down here really quick and put the amount of time. What I'm going to do is multiply 1,000 milliseconds by I, and that will be the time that we're assigning to set timeout. Okay, so basically what's going to happen is this is going to cycle through this loop 3 times. It will call set timeout 3 times. The time attached will be different each time. First, it'll be 0 seconds, so it should respond as soon as possible. Next, 1 second. Next, 2 seconds, because I is going to be incremented, and so the amount of time will be different. Now, what am I going to do? What do I want to do when this callback is invoked and placed on the call stack? I just want to log to the console what I is, the value of I. That's all I want to do. All right. Now, here's where the exercise comes in. I want you to pause the video for just a minute and take a look at that code and see if you can determine what is going to be returned. How often will this be invoked, the set timeout, and what will be logged to the console? All right, go ahead and pause the video. All right. What did you get as a possible answer? You might be a little bit surprised unless you've encountered something like this before in JavaScript. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to save that. I already have my live server going. So let's just open up the console here. And then what I want to do is I want to refresh this so we can see it again. So there's the first one, second one, third one. 3 console log statements. They were separated by the time we indicated, so the first one came very quickly after I refreshed the browser, and then the second one a second later, the third one a second past that. But notice that they all displayed a 3. Why is that happening? So let me get our code back here. I'm going to once again make it so we can see the console as we work with this. Well, let's talk about why that would happen. So set timeout is not going to be placed on the call stack until all of the JavaScript code has been run. And so we're going to run through all of this. And so this loop is going to be finished. What will the value of I be when the loop is finished? It will be 3, because the loop continues while it's less than 3. Once it's 3 or above, the loop ends. So once the loop is done, then the callback function can be added to the call stack. The callback function runs. It logs I to the call stack. What's I at that point? It is a 3 at that point. Now, this whole exercise also uses something we call closure, which we will dive a lot deeper into later in the course, as this is a critical part of JavaScript. Closure is. But basically, what's happening there is, even though the loop is done and is no longer a part of the call stack, the variable I is still available through closure. But the variable I is now 3 because we're looking at the same variable. Each one of those functions looks at the same variable, and that variable is now 3. Well, this is where the unique feature of let comes in. Let me go ahead and change this to let and save that. Notice what happens down here in the console. There's 0, 1, 2. Now we get what we expect. Now we're getting the variable value at the time set timeout was called. And that's really what we expected when we did this. And the reason that happens is when let is used in the header of a for loop, it not only declares the variable for the for loop like we've done here, but it redeclares a new I for each iteration of the loop. So really, when we're iterating I over here, we're redeclaring it. So it is a different variable. Each time set timeout is called, it is passed in a different variable. So by the time this function runs, it's not looking at the same variable. It's looking at 3 different variables for the 3 different times that it runs. So that is a unique feature of I in for loops. I is redeclared each iteration of the loop. So it's as if we have 3 different variables, not 1 variable. Now, why when we used var, why did it not affect this? That's an important question. Why was the timing still the same between let and var? Well, the reason for that is this is evaluated during the iteration of the loop. So these 1,000 is multiplied by the value of I, and that number is returned with set timeout. It's not accessing the variable later on. It's evaluating it immediately. And so that's why there's no difference between var and let with this part. All right, so that's a unique feature of let in for loops. And since the introduction of let is commonly used in for loops because it makes sense, we want this variable to be a part of this block scope and nothing more. All right, let's move on.